Hello and welcome to another AngelTrack demo video. Today we're looking over the basics of invoicing. So let's connect to our cloud server. I'm going to log myself in this time as a biller. I have a billing account named Eric Smith. Now we have three types of invoice generators for invoicing the three primary parties that we send bills to. For this demo, we're going to use the facility invoicer. Now, this drop down here will be preloaded with all the facilities that have eligible dispatches that meet these filters. So once you've chosen your date range and the type of invoice you're going to create, this list will fill up with all the facilities that you could conceivably make an invoice for. So if you intended to invoice Shady Acres and you didn't see them in the list, then you need to adjust the date range. Now, type of invoice, this is a tricky question. It's a learning curve, hump to climb. So I've got some diagrams to explain it here. A differential invoice is one that gathers up every new dispatch that is ready to be invoiced. So that's going to include dispatches that have graduated from QA and are going to be billed direct to the facility. It's going to include dispatches that have been denied by insurance and have been kicked over to the facility or the patient. It's going to include dispatches that were paid by insurance but have a copay due. And it's also going to include dispatches that had been invoiced previously but were not paid in full. So when we paid that prior invoice and there was not enough money to cover everything, then some dispatches will get kicked back to the billing office, and there they'll be picked up by the next differential invoice. So you can see a differential invoice will sometimes include some very old calls. You could have a 6-month-old call in the invoice because maybe it was working its way through insurance for months and months, and only when you get the final denial are we going to send it over to the facility. So differential invoices can have dispatches from any date. And if you look back here at the invoicer, if you choose a differential invoice, you do not get to specify a start date, because it's going to simply look back all the way to the beginning of time and find everything that's ready. You specify a cutoff date but no start date. So the second type of invoice is a complete invoice. This is where we choose a specific date range. Here, AngelTrack has already preloaded these for me. This is going to load up the month of April. So you can see by the diagram, and here's a bigger diagram. This is going to include just a certain date range, and it's going to include everything in that date range. And that means that it's going to include dispatches that are awaiting payment, like maybe it's already been invoiced before, and we're going to invoice it again because the facility has asked us, can I just get a March statement? Can I see a statement, everything from March? It's going to include these red ones here. These represent calls that are still in QA review, or maybe even a report that's not even finished. It's going to be everything for that date range without exception. So it's usually your nursing homes who ask for complete invoices because they have to book all of their expenses by month, and so they want to see an invoice of just 1 month, whereas it's usually your patients who are going to want a differential invoice because they simply want to know how much they owe you, period. So differential versus complete. Complete mostly for facilities, differential mostly for patients. Now, if you have a very flexible customer, a very flexible nursing home customer who, rather than booking stuff month by month, they simply ask you, can I get an invoice showing everything that's not yet paid? Well, then differential would be a good choice for that. And there is a third option here. You can go custom, and this is where you can choose on your own which dispatches to include, any date range you like, and any dispatches in any post-process state. So for example, I can include my finished calls. If somebody asks me to generate a complete statement showing everything I've ever done in a certain date range, including things that are completely paid and finished. So that's what that's for. We'll plan on making a differential. We'll make it for Shady Acres. Now I've got a couple other options here. These are self-explanatory. I'll just note that facilities can have a ledger balance where, let's say that last month's invoice, they did not pay it completely, they only paid half. I can choose to mark all of those calls as paid and then toss the deficit onto their ledger. So I can put an entry in their ledger that says that they owe me $3,000. And then the next month, when I go to make their next invoice, that $3,000 will show up automatically. So that's what that's for. Overriding quoted prices. This is typically done when you're billing under a facility contract. It is usually not used for patient invoices. What this will do is this will ignore any price quote on any of these calls. Anything that was set earlier, like when we were billing insurance, where we quoted it at retail and then claimed that against insurance, and then insurance pushed back on us and gave us an allowed price. So we want to override all of that. We want to ignore all prices set up to this point, and we want to strictly impose the facility's contract. Now, these contract prices that were loaded here, these belong to Shady Acres Rest Home. This is their price schema. It was automatically loaded for me, and they overrode the retail prices, which are shown there in white. These blue fields are where Shady Acres' contract prices have overridden my retail prices, and I could change them here if I wanted to. So I've got a wheelchair rate, a BLS rate, and an ALS rate for Shady Acres, and their contract does not cover car service or any of these other services. So if I wanted to, I could also type in some prices here. If I did not want to bill them at retail, I can just specify the prices right here. Now I could give it a name if I like. Shady Acres, all calls, all unpaid through May 1. I could do that if I like. I can just leave it blank. Also, an AngelTrack will generate me a reasonable title. The custom ID number, that is for if you are matching up an AngelTrack invoice with a QuickBooks invoice or other billing accounting system that you've got. I know that QuickBooks is very invoice centric, and you can't control the ID numbers that QuickBooks assigns. So if QuickBooks assigns the number 873, well, then we can tell AngelTrack that we're going to refer to this invoice as 873. And at that point, this invoice will be printed using the number 873 whenever you print it or go to mail it out. Okay, so here, before we hit the big create button, here's a little preview of what we're going to get. So before I create one, I just want to spot check the preview and make sure that it's showing what I expected. So I can see I've got 2 wheelchair visits on here, and here's the price that is going to be applied to them, and here's their mileage, and I've got 2 ALS visits with that contract price shown above and the mileage. Now notice here that I have a negative $10 on payments received. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. That's a service charge, which I'll show you in just a second. Just to show you about overriding, if we choose not to override, here you can see that both of these visits have been previously quoted because they went to insurance first. And so they've already got a price quote, and by choosing not to override it, I will get an invoice that honors those previous prices. And that's why when we're going to do a patient invoice, we generally don't override, because for a patient, whatever price you may have quoted them over the phone, you're going to want to honor that regardless. So, but we're doing a facility invoice, so we'll choose to override. the preview looks good. So let's create it real quick. Okay, so invoice 11 is ready. We can take a quick look at the printable version. This is the nice, prettily formatted version, ready to go off to our printer. I'm not gonna print it yet, but we can just eyeball it. So here's my totals. This is the cover sheet. There'll be a page break right here. Next page is going to be my wheelchair van services, a summary and the details, then a page break. And here's my ALS services. This is a summary and then the details. Now there's that service charge from earlier. This is a charge that was carried forward from before. See, this is a very old call. So at one point, looks like just a few days ago, someone in billing has applied a $10 interest charge to this balance. And so there's a $10 service charge recorded for this call, and so the invoice generator has picked it up and applied that in the amount owed. Now I also have the option here of adding in what's called a bang comment. What bang comments are for is for when I want something like this, when I want a little note to appear in the invoice next to this payable item. Like if I need to provide an explanation so that I don't get an angry phone call, I can add a bang comment. Start it with a bang, start with an exclamation point. Any comment I wish. Now, if I don't include that leading exclamation point, then all I'm doing is adding a note to the dispatch, and it will appear in AngelTrack's records, but it will not appear in the invoice. If I add the exclamation point to the front of the sentence, now when we reprint our invoice, there's the note. So bang comments appear right in the invoice, and that way we can hopefully explain all the charges that appear and not get any pushback from the facility, no pushback from the patient about getting it paid. So looks good so far. I also have the option to do some editing. Here's the 4 calls that it contains. Here's the 2 ALSs and the 2 wheelchair calls. Now these 4 calls are still at billing office because I have not yet committed this invoice. You saw earlier on the invoice generator page there was a big commit button. Committing means I am satisfied with this invoice, everything is correct, and I intend to mail it out. And so all of the calls that it contains need to be pushed forward to awaiting payment. So we can do that right now. Let's just commit it right here. So now it's been committed. All of the facility's contract prices have been pushed down to the individual dispatches. So this one here earlier that was priced at $2,000 from its insurance claim, it's now been repriced at according to the facility's contract prices, and all the prices have been recalculated, including our service charge, and this is ready to be mailed out. So I can either print it on a piece of paper like we saw right here, I can print on a sheet of paper, throw it in an envelope and mail it, or I can export it as a PDF and attach it to an email message, or I can export it out as an Excel document in case the facility who receives it, in case they need to do any slicing or dicing of the data for their own bookkeeping purposes. They'll let you know if they need to get it in Excel format. So, invoice is committed, all these are done, and if we were to go back to the invoice generator now, we can see that there are no facilities with billable services matching the criteria, because everything that was awaiting at the billing office is now present in a committed invoice. There's our 873, and there's the title that AngelTrack generated. So that's it. That's all it takes to crank out invoices, and don't forget the first time you do it, it's going to be a little overwhelming, it's going to be a little intimidating, so be sure you click on the help links. There's lots of good help for invoicing. You can reach the help right off the invoice generator page, right here. How does this work? don't hesitate to pull up the help and read through it, including the guide about the 2 different types of invoice. And you can also check out the YouTube channel for videos on more advanced invoicing topics, or come and check out the website, AngelTrackSoftware.com. That's AngelTrackSoftware.com. In the support section, there's a ton of online help and tutorials there too. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.